الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله حمدا لا حدود له الحمد لله امتنانا وإقرارا بفضله واعترافا بعظيم كرمه اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد أفضل الأنبياء وعلى خليفته سيد الأوصياء أمير المؤمنين وعلى سبطيه الحسن والحسين وعلى أمهما البتول الزهراء عليهم أفضل الصلاة والسلام صلوا على محمد وآل محمد عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين ونخص بالعزاء صاحب العصر والزمان عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Sisters and brothers, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص. Surely Allah loves those who fight in His way in a united and like solid structure. I start in the usual manner by a brief recap of the major theme of last night. I introduced the concept of masakh and transformation, that Quran at least on 4 occasions speaks about it. One specifically about Bani Israel. The second one is a little bit vague, but still is the concept of Sabbath and violation of Sabbath, about a city close to the sea. Third, about the issue of disciples of Prophet Isa salawatullah salam alayhi. And I also stated that there is a differences of opinion between commentators of the Holy Quran regarding whether this transformation and masakh that Quran talks about, is it physical? That is literally the individuals that are subjected to the wrath of Allah because their extreme disobedience physically changed, or this is a reference, allegorical reference to the heart and soul being so solid that deep down they feel nothing. I mentioned that the whole story of Karbala, but specifically the night of Ashura and the day of Ashura, has become historically a day in which two groups of people at least are separated and made distinct from each other. Those who supported Imam Hussein, and this is why they call it Yawm al-Fasl, and those who supported Imam Hussein and took a monumental leap into heaven, and those who did not support and wavered and stayed behind. And Quran has this Ahsanul Khaliqeen and Asfalus Safilin example, metaphor. At one condition, humans elevate themselves to the best of the best, and on the other, there are possibilities that they drop to the worst of the worst. There is a hadith with regarding to masakh that, contrary to the belief that this is something associated with Bani Israel, it could apply to our ummah as well. when we deviate from the right path and we do not follow the command of Allah, we become sinful to the point that we become forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can change. Our reality can change as well. Our hearts and soul will change. And I believe there is no better example than those people who were present during Ashura and stood in the camp of Yazid for the reality to be changed. Because when we compare, particularly the night of Ashura, and even during the day, when we compare the struggle of one group and the struggle of the other group, we see the marked difference between them. While Ashab al-Hussein, the disciples of the Imam Hussein, they are struggling, competing with each other for quickly to ascend to heaven. And they say, time, we want to get rid of this time, we want to go. The other side is competing and celebrating that by the end of today, we are going to be rewarded by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad and Yazid few pieces of silver for committing the most evil crime on earth. I mean, what else does one need to make a distinction between the two? Sets these two groups apart. And the situation continues up today. We have a group of, in the story of Gaza is a classic example. Now even the Sunni scholars have began to talk about it. When you have these people suffering on one hand, and then you have ulama of the court ministers, condemning Gaza for violating and disturbing the peace. Isn't that what they said about Imam Hussein? Don't go to Karbala. You are going to disturb the peace. Disturbing the peace. So this exactly existing today. By this time of the day on Ashura, the two groups achieved what they want. Around 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, the first phase of Ashura was over. Ashura centers on two phases. And each phase has a hero and heroess. The first phase on Shahada and martyrdom, Imam Hussein and the men or the male within the community and few women that participated in the battle, and they were killed. They played major role. By late afternoon, the last meeting between Imam Hussein and Zainab salamullah alayha, where Imam transfers all the information, holds Zainab close to him, and reminds her of responsibility now falls on her shoulder. Now it's for her to turn captivity into a dynamic act of resistance. Otherwise, without the role of Zainab, Yazid and Bani Umayyah and the court ministers and the publicity that they had, they would have turned Karbala into some kind of minor historical event that remained the story in Karbala and nobody knew anything about it. So now, this time, Karbala is quiet. One group celebrating their victory, and Ahlul Bayt under the guidelines and the guidance of Zainab salamullah alayha, sitting on the sand of Karbala, contemplating about the next day. The first phase is over. The tents are all burned. It took a long time from Zainab and the women within Ahlul Bayt to bring all the children that were running around in the desert, bring them together. One or two were lost until later on they were found, but at least most of them, they were settled, contemplating on the beginning of the first or the second phase. Those of you who have read a little bit about the history of Karbala, There is a statement by Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi that makes a reference to the role of Zainab and the issue of captivity. Muhammad ibn Hanafiya has two meetings with Imam Hussein. One in the Masjid al-Nabi the night that he departed. So he comes and he says, don't leave Medina because Medina is a safe place for you, the city of your ancestors, etc., people. And Imam says, I'm going to go to the grave of my grandfather. Pray and ask for guidance. He didn't say why, ask for guidance. Muhammad ibn Hanafiya departs and after a couple of hours comes to the Masjid al-Nabi and sees that Imam Hussein is coming out, so he inquires what happened. Imam responds to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya with this statement. He left him to think, because he knew the idea of martyrdom, the captivity, the role of Zainab in captivity, the role of Zainab in delivering the message, etc., was not close to the mind of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. So he put it into this context. Sha Allah an yarani qatilan wa sha Allah an yarahunna usara aw sabaya. It is the wish of God that I will be martyred. He said, okay, you want to go and kill yourself. What about the women? وَشَاءَ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَرَاهُنَّ سَبَايَا or usar. Allah wished that they will be captive. He said, إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ, and left. But still insisted that Imam Hussein reflects. There are alternatives if he feels that he is threatened. See, two individuals. Abdullah ibn Ja'far, when he hears about that Imam says, they will kill me, immediately goes to the governor of Medina, says, write me a letter that the life of Imam Hussein is going to be protected. This is his cousin. And Muhammad ibn Hanafiya says, go to Yemen. Stay over there until things settle. And the other place that Muhammad ibn Hanafiya comes is when Imam Hussein leaves Mecca towards Kufa. Again, he comes, both of them come to ask why Imam is leaving. So the notion that Hussein and Zainab are partners in the project of Ashura, and Zainab is responsible for taking the message of Karbala into the world that had never heard anything about Ahlul Bayt. Everything had been fabricated and changed, where Yazid, Muawiyah and Bani Umayyah become Ahlul Bayt, and Imam Hussein and Ahlul Bayt become the outlaws. Now somebody has to take this message into the heart of Kufr and smash the image that they have created, Muawiyah has created for 40 years around Bani Umayyah. This concept is far from Muhammad ibn Hanafiya or anybody else. The more I spend time on reading about life of both of them, I found it very strange. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Ja'far receives 1 million dirham a year, and as in annual contribution, Muawiyah gives it to him. Yazid increased this to 2 million. And we talk about Abdullah ibn Ja'far. When he died in year 80 or 82 or 83, who prayed on his janazah? Not Imam Zainul Abidin. It was the governor of Medina, representative of Bani Umayyah. This is why a number of new scholars are beginning to put question mark on the character of Abdullah ibn Ja'far. Some people say that he was, let me give you a little bit of background, is considered to be the first child of the Hijrah to Habasha. his father Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, and his mother Asma bint Umays. The first child of the immigrant to Habasha. Some people say 1 year before Hijrah, some people say on the first year of Hijrah. So he technically was 5 or 6 years older than Zainab. Because when he came, both of the family, the migrant came to Medina, it was after the Battle of Khaybar, when Amir al-Mu'mineen had already opened everything and victorious, and the Holy Prophet said, I don't know whether I should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing of victory in Khaybar or for blessing of Ja'far coming to Medina. He grew up in Medina under the auspices of the Holy Prophet and everybody else. And yet, when it comes to critical, this is why I say Ashura is an example of separating two groups of people. Imam Zain al-Abidin is present in Medina according to the historians. Some of them are from the Shia sources. They say he went and swore allegiance to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. It's really hard to believe. So Imam is not presenting to these closed mindset the whole concept. Karbala, right from the beginning of it till the end of it, was is a project for the Imam to attract attention and shake the foundation, the souls, the sleeping souls, to see whether they are attracted towards Imam Hussein. He leaves Medina at night, hoping that that would cause some kind of questioning in the mind of people in Medina. Why the son of Medina, the grandson of the Holy Prophet, is leaving Medina at night? What has happened? Medina is asleep, dead. Nobody asks questions. Comes to Mecca during Arafah, delivers the sermon as the flood of people coming to Mecca for their Hajj. He goes in the opposite direction, again hoping that people begin to ask why. The whole project from Medina to Kufa is constantly an effort to attract attention. Now, if we look at the life of Zainab Salamullah alayha, from the beginning, we see that from the moment that she is born, an ahadith we have that the Holy Prophet cried, Amir al-Mu'mineen cried, and then Fatima al-Zahra learned about it, later on others. She was trained from the childhood, prepared and trained and educated and informed for the eventual role that she's going to have in the project of Karbala. So she was more than ready. When Imam comes to her at the last time before he goes for the last visit, what does he say? Ya ukhta, dhakirini fi salat al-layl. Imam Hussein tells Zainab Salamullah alayha, if she wasn't ready, what kind of statement is this? Isbari ya ukhta. Be patient. You have a role to play. And then sometimes, what do we do? The way we present her, a distraught woman, constantly complaining, constantly crying and weeping and so on, confused of her role. We don't know that some people are talking about Zainab Salamullah alayha as the 15th Ma'soom, very close to Isma. So she was trained. During the trip from Medina to Kufa, constantly Imam Hussein sits with Zainab Salamullah alayha in consultation, and for the imminent events that are before them and the role that she has to play. Remember that you have a role in your captivity. Turn it into some kind of a platform where you agitate people, you inform people, you bring the issue of Ahlul Bayt to the mind of people, and you tell them what they're supposed to do. There are many women participated in the Battle of Karbala. You can go into the history of Karbala. A few of them were killed even. I don't intend to turn this discussion into some kind of Islamic feminism about what Islam does and how Islam balances the relationship between genders, etc., etc. That's a different story. But to turn captivity into advocacy for Ahlul Bayt is masterfully done by Zainab Salamullah. We're still analyzing the her sermons in Kufa, how eloquently she weaves sociology with politics, with theology, with history, reminding the people of Kufa of their background, who they are, etc., etc. Where people were struck by surprise when she began to present and give the sermon. Chins dropped, as the historians talk. Stands in front of Ibn Ziyad and in front of Yazid with absolute contempt for them. If it wasn't, what can I say? What can I do? This is what the life has turned to, that I have been reduced to the point that I have to speak to a low person like yourself. Imagine somebody stands in front of Yazid with all the pomposity and in the palace and says, I'm forced to speak to you. You don't deserve, you are not worthy of it. Literally shreds Bani Umayyah to pieces. This is something that she was prepared from childhood, that she had to go through it. So, the story of Karbala is a unique event. It has a mix of people. You have old, you have young, you have babies. You have men, you have women. Those who came stood on the day of Ashura, they might be number-wise are very few, but quality, this is the quality. You don't see anywhere else in the history of mankind or humankind that they stand up in front of Imam Hussein on the night of Ashura when he says, these people want me, you can go. And then one after another, the speech. How can we go? How can we justify our position? How can we stand on the day of judgment in front of your father and your grandfather and your mother and say that at the desperate hours that you needed, we deserted you? I mentioned last night Zuhair ibn Qayn. This is the person that says, I am on the deen of Uthman and he is on the deen of his father. But receptive hearts change. Why Imam Hussein from each station looks around to see who's around within the area, sends an envoy to go and talk to them. One extra heart brought back to the right path is better than nothing. Ashura should be an institution where hearts are changed, minds are changed, spirits are changed. So who is Zainab? Unfortunately, when we get to Zainab Salamullah alayha and trying to write or say something about her life, this is where we get into difficulty. Because of a scarcity of the detailed record of history, there are bits and pieces, anecdotal pieces exist regarding early part of her life. It's kind of a biographical account. She was born on the year 5th or 6th after Hijrah, the third child of Fatima al-Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salamu alayhi, and the first granddaughter of the Holy Prophet. Certainly, because of the ahadith that we have, the Holy Prophet, or what eventual role of Zainab Salaamullah alayha, the Holy Prophet gave huge amount of attention to her upbringing. He loved her and constantly associated with her. Until the death of her grandfather, and shortly after the martyrdom of Fatima al-Zahra Salaamullah alayha. Khutbah Fadakiyya that we have, well-known khutbah in Islam regarding Fatima al-Zahra standing in Masjid al-Nabi and literally challenging the authority of the new Khalif and reminding them, أفي كتاب الله يا ابن أبي قحافة أن ترث أباك ولا أرث أبي. You know nothing about Islam. Who narrates it? Zainab Salaamullah alayha. Ibn Abbas says this is a hadith from Aqilat Ahlul Bayt, the wisest girl of Ahlul Bayt. She has narrated it. At the age of 4 or 5, not more than 5, be able to literally pick the entire khutbah by heart and come home and start narrating it to the Ibn Abbas and others. This is the khutbah that was delivered. Ibn Abbas was sitting over there and couldn't remember most part of the khutbah. So after the martyrdom of her mother, it was her father that gave full attention to Zainab Salaamullah alayha, because he knew that Zainab has a role in the future. Sham has to be penetrated, and the image of Muawiyah and Bani Umayyah has to be smashed and destroyed. Captivity has to be the mean for it, because there is no other way that you could get inside. Every time she went from one place to another, the same message again and again and again about Ahlul Bayt. In Sham, it was Zainab Salaamullah alayha and Imam Zain al-Abidin, both of them, that delivered those scathing attack sermons on Bani Umayyah, Yazid, and everybody else. She was very close to Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah salam alayhi. Some people say the same manner that Fatima al-Zahra was close to her father, Zainab was, salamullah alayha, was close to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now, unfortunately, this is where the record and the account of her life goes into some kind of a void. Between 10th of Hijrah until 60th of Hijrah, which is literally 50 years. Because she was, when she attended Karbala, she was around 55. There is hardly anything beyond some special issue of marriage, children, and etc., etc. But Aqilat Bani Hashim, with all the upbringing, during this 50 years, what did she do? How did she behave in the social framework of the society as the political environment changed? Nothing. We suddenly rediscover Zainab in Karbala as she is prepared to deliver her responsibility and the captivity of her trip to Sham. During this period, Zainab Salamullah alayha turned captivity and into opportunity for advocacy about the values of Ahlul Bayt, the fallacy of Bani Umayyah, and all the images that they had created around themselves. Although most account, unfortunately, oral or as well as written part, we try to present Zainab in a demeaning character, far from it. Not only that, after going to Sham and going back to Medina, she returns to Medina and turns after Sham and Kufa and turns through sermons, lectures and gathering, turns Medina upside down. To the point that the governor of Medina sends a letter to Yazid. Ya Yazid, if you don't want another revolution in Medina, take Zainab out. They say Abdullah ibn Ja'far, when the whole family came to Medina, he did not recognize his wife because of the changes, how aged she was after the incident. From the moment she settled in Medina, she began. And finally, Yazid decided that no more. Sunnis understand the importance of Zainab in the uprising of Karbala, tyrannical rulers, more than we do. Let me give you an example. Saddam was captured. They took him out of a hole, a rabbit hole, and a number of people began to interview him. One of them was an Iraqi character that owned a bank, etc. I don't want to say anything about him at the moment. I've seen the interview. He said, regarding Shahid Sadr, he said, why did you kill Shahid Muhammad Baqir Sadr? There is a long discussion. He said, okay, that's because you consider him to be a threat. What about Bintul Huda, his sister? He said, I didn't want to have another Zainab loose in society. Saddam understood the political, the social role that Zainab played in turning Bani Umayyah's image around. He says, if had I left Bint al-Huda, she would have turned the society, at least in Najaf and Karbala, against my rule. I didn't want another Zainab. So year 61, she is exiled, and year 15th of Rajab or 16th of Rajab 62, almost a year and a half after the incident of Karbala, there is a debate whether she went first to Egypt or she went to Syria, Damascus, or ultimately she died or poisoned or whatever in Damascus. That's what the historians debate. But at the moment, what we have, Zainab Salamullah alayha's place is in Syria. That's well known. She remains the central figure that changed the history of Islam and kept the story of Karbala alive, protecting it from distortion. Because if it wasn't, the Bani Umayyah and Yazid thought that by killing Hussein and all the male figures, the chapter is closed and everything remains in Karbala. What they did not expect, that Imam Hussein had prepared the best person for the job, and the whole family, Ahlul Bayt, had prepared the best person. She remains as the role model, not only for the females within our society, for the males as well. You stand in front of you stand up to injustice. You support justice. You are not afraid. You deliver the sermon. Scathing attack. Not only role model for the women, but also for the men as well. Until she did her responsibility in Karbala, in Medina, until then other people began to take the responsibility and deliver after, whether she was poisoned or she died after her death. She deserves. We have in Quran story of Yahya and Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْهِ يَوْمَ وُلِدَ وَيَوْمَ يَمُوتُ وَيَوْمَ يُبْعَثُ حَيًّا. We can say the same thing about Zainab sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْهَا يَوْمَ وُلِدَتْ وَيَوْمَ اسْتُشْهِدَتْ وَيَوْمَ تُبْعَثُ حَيًّا. Inshallah, we learn a lesson. Unfortunately, tonight is the last night and the last lecture, but we learn a lesson. What we have talked about during Ashura so far, that we are confronted with a new Jahliya. This new Jahliya requires a group of people to take responsibility of challenging their foundation, political, economic, philosophical, social, and so on. Who better than the Shia community that we have role models of Karbala in front of us? These gatherings must be turned. I'm not saying not to express emotion and weep and cry. That's part of it. But that's not the only one. It has to be molded together with the other responsibilities that we have: social responsibility, political responsibility, education and information, as well as transformation of the society. We have, as Shia, a mission. That mission is to show the ethics and morality of Ahlul Bayt as a role model for the society when society fails in having a proper role model. Either we do it, or we will be questioned later. May Allah bless you all. And let's pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, first, the privilege of being truly from the followers of Ahlul Bayt. And also we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our living Imam, inshallah. And Karbala is something that we shouldn't forget. But at the same time, we shouldn't reduce it to mere trivial activities, which I'll call it, which is just crying and beating of the chest. Remember slogan that says Karbala must educate, must inform, and transform. If we walk out of the month of Ramadan, out of the after the month of Moharram or the 10th of Moharram, and have not been transformed, our souls, hearts are not transformed, we are not closer to Ahlul Bayt, to the values of Ahlul Bayt, then there is something missing. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.